Harrison Price for a Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. We're coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the historic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you're heading to a game in downtown Vancouver, make it a staycation. Book your Harrison Price rate at the Wall. Call 604-331-1000. Mention Harrison Price. Some blackout dates apply based on availability. Matt Harris with Blake Price. Remotely, Mike Rogerson, four-time Juno Award winner, hitting switches, conducting things. We got a big show planned for you. First of all, welcome in from Salt Lake City.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Missed you yesterday. I hope you had a good travel day.
Decent. Mm-hmm. Yes. Direct flight. That's all you can ask for.
Is there a direct flight to Salt Lake City?
How 2 per day, I think, on Delta.
2 per day.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was jam-packed. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
2 Olympic cities.
True.
Our poll question today, does Alex Edler belong in the Canucks Ring of Honor? Yes or no? You can vote at the Harrison Price X and YouTube channels. More on that in a moment, but today, our top story, got to start here, presentation, Yellow Dog Neighborhood Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits and Foolish Winery, is the statement released by Dakota Joshua yesterday, Vancouver Canucks winger, where he announces that he was diagnosed with testicular cancer this summer, that he has had a successful surgery to remove a cancerous tumor. He talks about the last few weeks being challenging and that he's been fortunate to be surrounded by incredible support, including his teammates in the Vancouver Canucks. He also mentions he will not be ready for the start of training camp, but is doing his utmost to join his teammates as soon as he can. And then, good on him, he encourages men to go and get checked regularly for testicular cancer. So, out of the blue, Blake, of course, these guys are human. They go off into the summer, and in some cases, just like you and me, wind up dealing with real world problems away from the hockey arena. So we wish Dakota Joshua the best. And the good news here is that he is expected to make a full recovery. So excellent news, as it turns out, for Dakota Joshua, who had a massive summer, right? Like, we were wondering whether he'd be the guy who shook free from the Canucks. Patrick Allvin had mentioned at his year-end media availability, they got to find the next Dakota Joshua, the next late bloomer, the guy who can come in here and really take a step forward. In Joshua's case, a leap forward in his career. It was a career season for him. And yes, he was able to get together with the Vancouver Canucks on a contract extension, and expecting bigger things from him this year, particularly if he doesn't have to miss a quarter of the season as he did last year after that fight in Chicago.
Yeah, he's been snake bitten a little bit in his career, and a fighting injury, not ideal. Obviously, a cancer diagnosis, most unideal. But first of all, it's super important for him to be public about it, because it does spread the awareness. And there's a lot of uncomfortable cancers that people don't like to talk about, but the more that we do talk about them, the less uncomfortable they become, and it creates awareness. And also, as men, and I think you and I can probably attest to this, we don't tend to pursue our discomfort and take matters into our own account. That it'll be fine. Just take care of yourself. We want you all to be okay. So really good for Dakota Joshua to take that on, and let's hope we'll get probably more color later on today as we are live here in the late morning. We're about 4.5 hours away from management talking, and I would guess that they provide some context of the amount of time that he's expected to miss. I mean, I would say, just by by reading between the lines of the statement, Matt, I'm guessing that's between 2 and 5 weeks sort of thing was my gut, but we'll probably get some more details.
Yeah, he mentions the start of training camp. So that sort of makes you wonder, okay, will he be available at some point during training camp, which would be extraordinary, because that would be this weekend, or preseason when the games get going next Tuesday, or for the start of the season on October 8th against Calgary. The statement also mentions that the team will provide updates as appropriate. So as you say, Blake, perhaps as soon as this afternoon, when Patrick Allvin meets the media there at training camp in Penticton.
Let's talk about rhythm and bruise. Yellow Dog wants to remind you and neighborhood that they'll be at Rhythm and Brews in Kamloops Saturday, September the 28th. This autumn evening event has beer, cider, spirits, as well as live music, food trucks, and a night market. Grab your tickets now if you want to be, or will be anyway, in the area for Rhythm and Brews. What a great name coming up later.
Yeah. So let's say that Joshua is unavailable for some time here, and until we get further word, he will be. I think a lot of people anticipate, and we had the conversation with Jeff yesterday, that Danton Heinen, new signing, will play with JT Miller and Brock Boeser. Coach Tocchet may have some other ideas. I think a lot of people anticipate that Jake DeBrusk and Elias Pettersson will be a duo, and the question becomes who plays third wheel on that line. We talked about that Monday, whether that be Nils Höglander, whether that would be Daniel Sprong, the new addition, whether that's Connor Garland or Dakota Joshua bumping up. In the meantime, if Joshua is unavailable, does that mean there's room for Höglander and Sprong both in the top 9? Does that create opportunity for Kiefer Sherwood to move on up and be more than just a fourth liner? And then, towards the back end of the forward group, does that mean that both Nils Aman and Phil DiGiuseppe or even Arshdeep Bains are going to have the opportunity to play higher up the lineup or interplay their way into the lineup? Needless to say, there is a lot of different ways that the coaching staff can go about structuring their lines. And frankly, I would not be surprised to see Tocchet mix things up as training camp goes along, to see different guys and different combinations. You'll remember, Blake, we didn't see any of Hughes and Hronik together last year in training camp or preseason. Then lo and behold, there they were on the first pair on opening night, and it stayed that way for the better part of the season. So what do you see as the trickle-down effect here as Joshua heals in terms of the opportunity and who's most likely to seize?
Matt, I've been disappointed so many times by this before. We have talked about in training camp, oh, look at the opportunity. Look at the upward mobility that's available for players X, Y, and Z to move up. Surely they will seize the brass ring here in training camp and in the preseason. And then after the first 3 preseason games, we're like, do they know that there's availability there? So unfortunately, I've been disappointed so many times. I hate to leave that storyline there again, but it is. And it's not that Dakota Joshua is going to quote unquote lose his job over this. The minute he's ready to come back in, he's going to assume a very meaningful spot back in the lineup. He's not going to go back to the fourth line in any way, shape, or form. But there's at least a temporary opening. And if you're one of these guys that is nibbling on the edge of a top 9 spot or the edge of a roster spot, this should be another kick in the pants, because when Dakota Joshua comes back and assumes his rightful spot, somebody gets bumped down. You don't want to be that somebody that gets bumped down. And so those 2 top 6 winger spots, while there's numerous candidates, I don't think anybody's got it locked up. You said Danton Heinen. Sure, that makes sense, Matt, but I think he's got to win it still. He's still got to show something. For sure.
Especially with this coaching staff and this head coach.
So if you're Höglander, if you're even a guy like Kiefer Sherwood, and certainly a guy like Daniel Sprong, who's on such a minimal contract, easily variable, you've got to know nothing's in indelible ink here. Everything will be earned, and we know that Tocchet is a earn it kind of guy. So, God, I hope I'm not disappointed again.
Yeah,
and we get some performances.
I hope you're not. I mean, of course, it was Dakota Joshua a couple of years ago who seized opportunity. He came in as sort of a bit of off the radar free agent signing. Hadn't really yet established himself as a National Hockey League player, and the next thing you know, he was more.
And then last year didn't. Matt, it was the opposite last year. Remember when he gets bumped to the C?
Last year was the year where he maybe thought he was an NHL made man, and Coach Tocchet gave him a wake-up call, and it wound up being the best thing to happen for him because he was extraordinary from that point forward. Improved his points, improved his goals, improved his physical play. I hear you. What I will say is, I think you're looking at a left shot with Miller and Boeser. We talked about this with Jeff yesterday. They don't have a ton of right shot. I mean, Boeser, Garland, Sherwood, and Sprong. So I'm not sure you're going to see 2 of the righty wingers loaded up on the same line. If Boeser continues to play with Miller. I think you're looking at a left shot on that line. So is it Danton Heinen? Is it DeBrusk? Höglander, I think, would really have to impress the coaching staff to get that sort of plum assignment. Then when you get to Pettersson and DeBrusk, who are both lefties, I do think you're looking at a right shot there. And we don't think it's going to be Boeser because he's the duo with JT Miller. So is that Connor Garland? If in fact that great line with him and Bluger and Joshua aren't going to be able to start together because of Joshua's availability, is that Daniel Sprong because of the offense that he could bring, or is Kiefer Sherwood? And they've talked about how they love his shot, and how Coach Tocchet and the staff feels about forecheckers, and we know Sherwood is every bit of that after the playoff series against Nashville. There's just all sorts of combinations and concoctions that can go on here, and that's part of the fun of training camp and preseason, watching these guys vie and sitting down and playing armchair head coach and structuring the lines the way you see them.
It's taken me 50 years to get to this point, almost 50. But the more I realize, like because of the marathon that the 82 games are, don't start formulating your playoff roster in October, folks. It's a different thing. You've got to get there. Think about the contributions of Sam Lafferty early on. So Kiefer Sherwood sounds like a crazy thing to do in the opening month of the year, but he's going to be shot out of a cannon. New team, blue collar coach sort of personality, at least for Tocchet. I think he's more progressive than that. But if you can catch lightning in a bottle for a guy that ultimately is going to be playing in your bottom six, use it. Like they used Sam Lafferty goals last year to their advantage. And they made hay while the sun shines. So I don't think there's any shame in juicing lemons early, knowing that you're eventually going to round into form. And in terms of one other combination too, I wonder if Heinen is the Dakota Joshua replacement stand-in with the same size frame.
Could be
with Garland.
It's there's similarities there in the player profile. Outstanding point, Blake, about October, November, and how it likely is going to be different than April. Outstanding example in Sam Lafferty. And I'll see your Sam Lafferty, and I'll raise you a Phil DiGiuseppe, who played early on with JT Miller and Brock Boeser, right?
Yes.
Who among us had Phil DiGiuseppe playing in the top 6 last year? But he played 8 solid games as a puck retrieval, forecheck guy, spade work, dirty work type of guy, with 2 highly skilled player, and it worked beautifully as the Vancouver Canucks got off to that outstanding start last year in October. So, there could be some real big surprises here, and I love the point you make about Sherwood being shot out of a cannon. Getting a National Hockey League deal with another team, a team that obviously appreciated his work after facing him over 6 games against the Nashville Predators. Yeah, I am open to any kind of combinations that this coaching staff puts together. Number one, I think they deserve the benefit of the doubt after last year. And number two, and I say this with a little trepidation because, I don't think you can be too expectant or big for your britches, but it may well play out, and we haven't had this for a long time, partner, where you have a little bit of leeway to be able to experiment with your lineup. Something that hasn't...
It's almost a soccer mentality. Maybe it's my soccer career here leaking over, but, a soccer coach doesn't just throw his best 11 out every time. He's looking at the schedule. He's manipulating with the big picture in mind. And to a degree, maybe, a hockey team could do that too, in that, it's a marathon. You got a lot of games here. See what you got with certain guys. And if the guy's hot, put him in a spot where you can get everything out of that hot streak, knowing that he'll probably be bumped back down.
Yeah, and in previous years, look, it's not like they don't have to get off to a good start this year. Part of the formula last year was getting off to a good start, being a front runner, banking your points, and then, making much of the rest of the regular season stress-free in terms of the will they, won't they get in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But the difference this year is, Blake, if they go out and lose the first 3 games of the season, I'm not sure Tocchet's hitting the panic button there, right? No. You've got a group that can overcome adversity. You know you've got a group that isn't going to be all that daunted if you go 0 for 6 in points over the opening week of the regular season. So we'll see how they shake it out. Should start even later today, perhaps get more on that at the very least tomorrow morning from the South Okanagan Event Center in Penticton. I believe 9:30 is the first group that is going out. 3 different groups this year. And Blake, Jeff and I were wondering yesterday whether Lekramaki gets a plum assignment early on here, just to infuse the young guy with some confidence, huh? Could you see him beside Pettersson and DeBrusk to start tomorrow?
Yeah. I mean, like, absolutely nothing on the line. No shame in just looking to see how he rises to the occasion. It's just a free look. So
no expectation that he's going to be there or anything like that. Just, hey kid, you're an offensive player. If all goes well for you, we think you're going to probably line up again with Elias Pettersson at some point in your career, and Jake DeBrusk, given the long-term contract he signed. So here we go.
You could even do it. You could even do a preseason game.
Here's a little peephole into the future, son. Of what NHL life can be for you if you work hard, if you have a successful season in the American Hockey League, and do all the things that we ask.
Well, maybe this is our segue to September the 25th, which they made a little of announcement for their preseason game against the Calgary Flames, in which they name dropped 4 names that, by their own verbiage, Matt, are saying they will be in the lineup that night, and Pettersson is one of them. Of course, Jonathan Lekramaki is expected to be an Abbotsford Canuck. That would be a nice tip of the
stands to reason that he'll play in that game. Yep.
Put him with Pettersson again. Give people a little bit of a charge and say, "Oh, I saw him that day playing with Elias Pettersson." Again, you're not committed to anything. That's game 2 of 6 in the preseason.
Yeah, and they're promoting Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, Jake DeBrusk, and Tyler Myers for the September 25th game, preseason game at Abbey Center against the Calgary Flames. So you can be. I don't want to say you can be certain or sure, because all it takes is a little knock for one of those guys to get held out. But as of right now, the intention sure seems like, you hope the promotional people are on, have cleared this with the coaching staff before they go out and message to the public. If you
I think
are
they were
interested in the game,
for the lineup last year, right? And so I think this is maybe a nod to that. We'll do our very best to put these 4 guys at least in the lineup.
All right, let's get to our poll question and Alex Edler. The Canucks announced Tuesday that Alex Edler, the all-time leading defenseman in most every consequential Vancouver Canucks statistical category, is signing a 1-day contract and retiring as a Vancouver Canuck. There will be a pregame ceremony on October 11th in advance of the game against the Philadelphia Flyers. I'm not sure if I'm going to ask J-Pat about the 1-day contract on Friday when he joins us next, knowing how Jeff feels about these 1-day contracts.
I wouldn't. No.
Edler is 38 years old. He, of course, last played for the LA Kings in 22-23, spent 2 seasons with the Kings after parts of 15 seasons with the Vancouver Canucks. The all-time leader in defenseman, games played, 925 points, 409 goals, 99. Finished one shy. Assists 310 and power play points 177. Edler, who married a local girl, has provided a statement for the release. I'm humbled and honored to officially end my career and retire as a member of the Vancouver Canucks. I consider myself lucky to have started my career with such an outstanding organization in this amazing city with the best fans in the NHL, finishing my NHL career where it all began as something very special for myself and my family. And to my understanding, they live here, or at least live here partially, still here in Vancouver. The leading category. So let's just get this out of the way. The 925 games are by far the career leader. Harold Snep's is second at 781 games. So it's like it's almost 2 full seasons more that Edler played than any other defenseman in Canucks history. The 99 goals are not far and away the leader, because Ohlund had 93, but Quinn Hughes is an awfully long way back at 43 goals. So that goals record is going to stand, I suspect, for some time for Alex Edler. The same cannot be said of the assist record. Quinn Hughes is 20 back. He could have him beat by Remembrance Day.
Yes.
Or at the very least, Christmas. If Hughes stays healthy in the first couple of months of the season, he is going to be the all-time franchise leader in assists by a defenseman. And by the end of the year, he could eclipse Alex Edler in points. Hughes at 333, Edler at 409, so 76 points behind if Hughes has another point per game season. And again, that's very much about staying healthy. He will pass Edler by the end of the year. Should also pass Edler in power play points as well, where right now Alex Edler is 28 points up on number 2, Quinn Hughes.
Now, before we get into the muck of the Ring of Honor, and I don't think anybody's calling for his jersey in the rafters, but before we get into the muck of the Ring of Honor, we do have to state details are still relatively few on what this Edler night entails. Is it possible, Matthew, that they sneak attack and put him in the Ring of Honor without actually stating so ahead of time?
Yeah, it's possible. Typically, they've liked to promote and message this for the players' individual fans, and so you talk about a sneak attack for the fans, but surely Alex Edler and his group would know, so that everyone could come from Sweden and that sort of thing.
But I think they're going to come anyway. They might come anyway. All
right.
Now
I would be surprised. Is it possible? Yes. I would be surprised.
I would also be surprised in that I thought they were reading the room on the Luongo reaction to the Ring of Honor, seeing that I would think the majority of people, I don't know how you felt about it, I felt the majority of people wanted to hit his number in the rafters.
Agreed.
They didn't read the room, and they didn't sneak attack there, and I thought that would have been a marvelous, because he would have reacted to that so perfectly. You could have surprised him with that, and I think his reaction would have been amazing. Yes. He would have rolled with the punches. They didn't take advantage of that.
No.
And I don't think Edler is the kind of guy that is a surprise kind of guy. I could be wrong, but I think they'll probably play it straight. So I think we have to take it at face value right now that it's probably not Ring of Honor.
No, but I also think that Ring of Honor could come. I don't think because they're having this ceremony for Edler means he is not getting into the Ring of Honor one day, because to answer our poll question, does he belong? Unequivocally, yes. I mean, when you're the franchise's all-time leader in this category at your position, and the franchise has been around 54, 55 years, that is saying something. I mean, you could argue, and again, Quinn Hughes is going to surpass this, but he has had the best career of a defenseman in the history of the club. I think you can also argue that he is better than the 2 defensemen who are already so enshrined in the Ring of Honor, and Matthias Ohlund and Harold Snepsts. Now, it's a little bit of pick your pleasure here in terms of what style of defenseman you prefer. I mean, Snepsts was a shutdown, in-your-face, tough guy. Ohlund was a two-way guy who possessed a pretty good shot and was an offensive contributor. Of course, Edler was at one point as well. Ohlund was more rugged also than Edler, but by any measure, he is one of, if not the best defenseman the Canucks have had prior to Quinn Hughes. And in my view, at least the equal, and I would say superior, to the 2 defensemen you've already enshrined in the Ring of Honor.
Miss L on YouTube. If Ohlund is on there, then Edler is more than deserving. I've seen that from a couple of people already. Others saying he's just underappreciated. Johnny says you can't let everyone into the Ring of Honor, but there's only so much room. But yes, Edler belongs in there.
Yeah. So this can we, because you bring up the room thing as well. You can, first of all, there's still room. Secondly, if you get to a point where you have too many to fit in the current dimensions, you can go about changing the size of the displays.
Lower the font.
Exactly.
As simple as that. We've all done that. Write a one-page report. And
exactly. Well, and then, in terms of the other thing, he's not deserving. There's too many guys in the Ring of Honor, blah, blah, blah. The Ring of Honor is about celebrating the history of the club and the people who came to this community, came to this organization, and excelled. Alex Edler checks every box for Ring of Honor. I was even looking at average ice time, and of course, average ice time per game, Blake, is a stat that's a little more current, so some of the older guys don't apply here. He's 8th all time average ice time per game. Defenseman with the Vancouver Canucks. Well, I mean, 3 people ahead of him on the list are Keith Carney, who played 18 games.
Right.
Brian McCabe, who played 95 games, and Philip Hronek, who has played 85 games as a Vancouver Canuck. Not to mention Christian Ehrhoff, who played 2 seasons here. So when you take a look at guys who had extended careers as Vancouver Canucks on the blue line, the only 3 guys who have averaged more time on ice than him were Olin, Jovanovski, and Hughes.
I think here's the way I would divvy it all up. I would divvy up jersey retirements for guys that are league-wide, like trophy challenging players, or players that, you know, helped you win a Stanley Cup. And we know, of course, that's not really a consideration here. Now, guys like Smeal and Linden, I mean, they were the best in a very bony era, you know, like, and they wanted to be able to celebrate something. So I think they get in because of those circumstances. From here on in, though, I mean, I think it was our own Mike Rogerson in the comments talking with some of our listeners and viewers, talking about, you know, the Ring of Honor is kind of built for exactly this kind of a player, like a categorical leader, but not so elite that he
doesn't transcend the market.
No, it doesn't transcend the market.
Exactly. To the other point about if you put him in, there are other guys who are more deserving. I have long been a supporter of Ryan Kesler to be in the Ring of Honor. I have Clark on Twitter asking me, are guys like JT Hughes, Petey, and Brock all no-brainers as of right now? And yeah.
JT's not. Longevity's not going to be there, and I don't think he's not what he won't have.
Oh, but he's going to be amongst the leaders in Canucks scoring, Blake, when it's all said and done.
When it's all said and done, yes. So assuming he plays 4 more years and it has 70 to 90 points the next 4 years, yes. But I'm saying right now, no. But can you forecast it? Yes. Right. But Hughes, by virtue of a Norris Trophy, he's there already. He's there literally already.
I think Hughes is going to have his number retired here.
Yes.
If this continues to track. Miller's 14th as it stands right now in Canucks all-time scoring with 402 points. Let's give him 80 for the season. Not get too greedy here.
Mm-hmm.
He would leapfrog into 7th place, including ahead of Pavel Bure all time. So when we say it's all said and done, I think it's one more year, the likes of which we've come to expect from JT
Where's
Miller.
Kesler on that? Where's Kesler on points?
He's 15th. He's right 15th. Behind Miller at 393.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But of course, points don't tell the whole story with Ryan Kesler.
No, but
you're talking about at his height, the best defensive forward in the league, a Selke Trophy winner. So you want to talk about NHL trophies, Ryan Kesler ticks that box. And for me, Ryan Kesler would deserve the honor of Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to move on here because yesterday on the show, we talked about Patrick Allvin's bold comment about Brock Boeser. And I want your take on this as well, that Brock took his foot off the gas after 30 goals and could have scored 50 as opposed to just the 40 he scored. Well, the Canucks general manager is not done challenging his best players. Piece with Ian McIntyre at Sportsnet on Alex Pettersson, quote, I definitely need him back to another level, which he's capable of. We all know that. I think he's extremely hungry to show that. You know, he's a proud person and a player, and I'm pretty sure that he set his individual goal and mindset at a different level here. I think he's really eager to come back and show everyone that he's capable of playing consistently. He did not shy away from the struggles Pettersson had in the second half of last season and the playoffs. In fact, he would go on to talk, when asked about that by McIntyre, say, quote, I don't know if I was surprised, but with regards to the second half slump, but, you know, the contract negotiations were hanging over him, ... and could maybe see it. It was a little bit of a relief after that. Maybe he took his foot off the gas a little bit. So he uses the exact same phrase with Pettersson as he did with Boeser. But I also think for a lot of the players, this was really their first time playing in the playoffs with 18,000 fans and traveling, and how hard the games are, it's different. They are pushing. They are pressing. They are dropping gauntlets at the feet of their best players, because coming from a Pittsburgh Penguin organization where you had superstars like Crosby and Malkin who were able to win Stanley Cups, that's the goal here. That's the gambit. And they are letting these guys know it isn't easy. The hard part is just starting. Embrace the hard, as Tocchet has been talking about with his slogan for this year. Your thoughts on him challenging Boeser and Petey in the last 48 hours play?
Yeah, I think it is funny as embrace the hard can be, and people have had some fun with it already. It's all wrapped up into the same thing. The most difficult thing, I think, in life, Matt, is to do whatever you do well consistently well. And to have a flash in the pan, we see it all the time. We see it at the micro level with a player having a great season. We see it from teams. They have a little spike and then it goes away. And I don't think management, certainly don't think the fans, want that to be a spike. There was a lot of fun had. It was a different vibe the whole year in this city because of the damn hockey team. Like, that's where we are in Canada here, where a hockey team changes the mood of a city, on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think anybody wants to put that genie back in the bottle, but it's hard. It's hard to do it night after night because the adrenaline of doing it the first time is often what carries you through. But when you're asked to do it again and get to the finish line of, 6 months regular season, 5-month regular season, and then start the hardest tournament in sports, the Stanley Cup playoffs, that is a lot to ask.
Yep.
And they're going to have to prove that they are up for that on a nightly basis. And I don't know that I agree that Boeser let his foot off the gas. I think it's just hard. I think it's people figure out there's another team on the other side is like, wow, that guy's got 30 goals already. Let's do something a little different in how we manage him. So it's just hard. But that tells you how elite the other guys are.
I thought he coasted a little bit. I agree with you for the most part. He was probably more front and center in opposition scouting reports, but I also think there was a little bit of coast that went on.
Sets in though, of course.
Yeah. And Pettersson cited the knee tendonitis, but look, Allvin is following up on very much the message that Rick Tocchet was sending towards the end of last year, more pronounced at the end of last year, through the year, but more pronounced at the end of last year. And as we just mentioned, we'll probably double up on that this year. But I think what they're asking Elias and Brock to do is just be a little less precious. My word, not theirs. Fight through, push through. It is a very difficult existence when you're a marked player, night in, night out. It is very difficult to play 82 games and then the Stanley Cup playoffs. You're going to have knocks. You're going to have dings. Don't be that diva sprinter who gets in the block and, my hamstring's not 100% today, so, maybe I'm not going to finish on the podium. They're asking them, mind over matter. This is what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. You look at the list of injuries that winning Stanley Cup teams have. Some of the injuries are just mind-boggling that guys are playing through them. We can't be succumbing to tendonitis. We can't be succumbing to inflammation and those sorts of things. That's what I see now as the messaging now that they've achieved success, right? Or some measure of success. They would probably push back and say we've achieved nothing, but we all in the market look at it and go, what a successful season for the Vancouver Canucks. We've been waiting for this for so long. Were the players ever great, especially in the first half, and how exciting and how nourishing was that playoff run after being out of the Stanley Cup playoffs for so long, not having a postseason game here in our city in nearly a decade.
Well, I hope the players continued to watch the playoffs after they were eliminated and saw what the teams looked like that made it through. Like, if they had magically won Game 7 against the Oilers, do you think it was getting easier? Like, do you think you were getting less injured in the playoffs? Probably not.
Yeah. And I'm going to be really interesting. And Allvin notes that Pettersson arrived early to participate in the captain's skates. And I'm going to be really interested to hear what Elias has to say tomorrow, because I think part and parcel of what this management group and coaching staff is asking him to do is don't come off as the aggrieved, sullen guy that you were last year. Like, the attitude and the body language have to change as well. There's got to be some joy. There's got to be less aggrieved. There's got to be more passion demonstrated outwardly. We know he's a quiet guy. We know he's not the most demonstrative. That's fine. But just don't sink to the levels that you did last year, where it seemed like every media session was a little bit of a to and fro. Every single answer was couched or incomplete. Everything was done with not with a twinkle in his eye, but with the opposite of that, with a disdain for everything that was going on around him. That can't be the case anymore.
People might not want to hear this example, but it was some part of the 2-9-1 start of the Oilers or whatever it was. They were getting waxed again. I don't think it was in one of the Canuck games. It was another one. And there was that great shot of McDavid and Draisaitl side by each on the bench as they are down by multiple goals once more. And McDavid pats the knee of Draisaitl, and Draisaitl pats his knee back. It was sort of like, okay, this is really crappy, but
we're in this together.
We're in this together, and we're going to do this. And guess what? They freaking did it. So, like, there needs to be a little bit of that too.
Well, to extend your example, let's hope no Vancouver media member asked Elias why so pissy this year, because towards the end of last year, he did sound a little like Draisaitl, that one infamous press conference where he did sound just a little off-put by everything that was going on around him, when really getting paid millions, kid, to play hockey, it's not that bad a lot in life. On to Demko. Unless you had something in the audience. Okay.
Oh, you know what? One other little thing on the comments about the consistency in practice from Allvin.
Yeah.
How much of that is just a little bit of a warning to his coach too? Of, hey, you're accountable for what goes on in practice.
I think the first half year that Tocchet was here, it was about evaluation. Because remember, Allvin's comments about practice predate Rick Tocchet getting here, right?
Yeah.
So I think we can rightly assume it is centered on players, not coaching. But I think the first half of the season when Tocchet was here was about evaluation. Okay, let's see how these guys go about their business. I think last year it was about we need to change how a lot of you go about your business. And yeah, I mean, he's coming off a Jack Adams break, so he is absolutely safe this year. Like, there is no
one's
reason.
No. But I'm just saying, he's the guy in charge of practice. If you don't like the practice, have the coach do something about it.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And Frank Corrado is terrific on this later in the program. You'll hear that it really shouldn't be too difficult to practice with purpose and practice with intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And to meet expectations or exceed in practice. It's not like you have another team out there trying to prevent you from doing as such, right? So, yeah, I think that's probably fair, Blake. But I also think this is very much player-centered and not necessary, because I just, Boudreau was a different type of coach. And I think previous to that, Travis Green pushed them into places that, as young, mostly immature players, they didn't necessarily want to go, because they have been having success their whole lives doing what they were doing, and didn't sort of realize what it took to win in the NHL. I don't think that came about until last year with Tocchet, and full credit to him. And he was a worthy Jack Adams winner. And, I said many times last year, amongst the best coaching jobs that I've seen in any sport at any level over the quarter century I've been doing this job. But I think, a ton of credit goes to Tocchet last year. And it just may be that some of these guys aren't self-starters. I mean, IMAC asked Allvin the question, like, they've got to take ownership of the process here, right? And Allvin's like, yeah, of course. That's what all the best teams do. That has been in the sporting lexicon for the better part of a quarter century. Like, that was back in the first book about the New England Patriots dynasty that, Tom Brady and the guys got together and went, okay, like, we can't be out here practicing and doing so because we're trying to please our coach. We need to be out here practicing and doing all the things that we need to do because we intend on being champions. and we're accountable to each other. And if we have to rely on a coach barking at us to do this, do that, make sure you practice hard, make sure you get in the weight room, get your rest, nutrition, then half the battle's already lost. So yeah,
there's got to be personal and professional accountability.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. On Demko, Allvin, quote, again from the IMAC article, he was to be medically cleared for the next potential round, had they, of course, beaten Edmonton. That being said, it's one thing when you're medically cleared and one thing when the coach feels you're ready to go. But Thatcher was supposed to be medically cleared. I don't know how to read that comment. One thing to be medically cleared, one thing when the coach feels you're ready to go.
Well, it also flies in the face of what we hear from basically every coach with any sport that involves a goalie. I listen to my goaltending coach when they say he's ready to go, then I assume he's ready to go. They usually digest themselves.
Well, no, but that, to me, that was one of the things that's unclear from the comment. Was that his head coach or was that his goaltender coach feeling he's ready to go?
Yeah, I mean, that I can hear that. If he's saying that I was waiting for the thumbs up from Ian Clark, yeah, that could have been something different. But I think Ian Clark's going to be pretty realistic about whether or not Thatcher. Clark has full belief in Thatcher Demko. So and wants Thatcher Demko to succeed. So if he thought Thatcher Demko could not harm himself and help the Canucks win a game, I think Clark would have put him in the lineup.
Mm-hmm. He also says that he feels they're set at goal after bringing in Dylan Ferguson on the PTO. It sounds like there's some downplaying with regards to the need to sign a Kevin Lankinen or further fortify the goal. Now, that could be the God's honest truth. That could be posturing because
both are possible. Yep.
They know or they anticipate that they may need to make a goaltender move depending on how Thatcher checks out here medically, how he looks. If he does look, if we do get a chance to see him in training camp or even preseason games, that they've taken it to the line here, Blake, without anything sort of official, that he's still saying, oh, I'll know more in a couple days on Thatcher, suggests that like this medical is going to be a eureka moment. Do you believe that?
I mean, you would think they would have more ongoing intelligence on that.
That's it. It's a Vezina finalist goaltender.
And you're allowed
who's been in town for an awfully long time.
There are certain CBA fences up around who can look at them and who can report on them. But I would think that on a player that couldn't finish the season last year because of injury, that those fences come down and you're allowed to investigate a player's injury more thoroughly. So that's where I'm a little bit gray. If he was a player that played right to the end of the season, I don't know. Maybe you could make the argument you're not allowed to investigate the player until he's actually in camp. But I think with injured players, you're allowed to get in there. So
I don't know why it wouldn't be year round. Like I just yeah. Anyways, so yeah, I guess here comes the eureka moment with Thatcher Demko, one way or the other, when this medical's complete, and when either management talks about it this afternoon or we hear more tomorrow. On Boeser, first of all, our poll yesterday was: do you expect Boeser to hit 40 again? What says you?
I don't. I mean, it's a crazy number, but I don't think anybody should be disappointed if he scores 34, 36. I think those are reasonable expectations. I expect him to be around the 35 goal mark, and that's not disappointing to me at all.
So here's the thing. They decided not to negotiate with Boeser's camp this summer. They didn't want to negotiate coming off a career year. Of course, Boeser had the blood clots that didn't allow him to participate in Game 7 against Edmonton. And, you don't have to go too far back to find a Brock Boeser contract that was untradeable from the Vancouver Canucks because of his struggling, not to mention a injury history. McIntyre asked him, do you need to make a decision on Boeser by the trade deadline? Allvin says, yeah. So they're willing to roll the dice, and if Boeser has another big year, do what they did with Pettersson last year. Okay, let's get you locked up long term prior to the deadline so that we don't have to be tempted, so that we don't have to evaluate our options. Or also sounds like they may be willing to trade Brock Boeser when he answers it that way.
Yeah, I don't think it's a knock. It's the truth of the matter is he's still going to be coming in at a decent number. He won't be super expensive. I think you can still get him. Probably it begins with an 8, but it's certainly, to me, it doesn't begin with anything.
Oh, it certainly begins with an 8. There's no question. I mean, unless he were to go out and have an absolute stinker of the year, I think he first.
But if Sam Reinhart's got a number that begins with 8. I don't know how.
Well, but a little different. Reinhardt took less to stay in Florida. It's a tax-free jurisdiction. Plus, he just won a cup there and was building a house. So,
nevertheless, those are the components.
But Brock goes home to Minnesota every summer, right?
But here's the thing: is that he's not. If you went into a lab to create a goal scorer in the NHL, you wouldn't have him look like this. He's not big, like by NHL standards. He's not fast, again, by NHL standards. He's got a good shot, but it's not all world. Like it's not like people out east are like, have you seen Brock Boeser's shot?
It's not Ovechkin or Line A or
no. So now, are there guys that have been way above average players in the NHL with again, not, I won't say subpar because he's above average, but you know what I mean, non-elite stats or non-elite skills. Yeah, there have been people that have made it work with non-elite skills just because of how smart they were and how they see the game and all that sort of stuff. So I think they just need the extra proof here that he's not a 24-goal scorer that can give you a bump every night, that he is an elite 35-goal scorer. And if he can show them again that he's on that pace again this year with the skill set that he's got, I think they can be convinced. But otherwise, I think they might be willing to say everything went right for him this past year. And that he's really a 26-goal scorer, and that's how we'd like to pay him, if at all. So I think that's their mindset here, and I don't necessarily blame them for having it.
No, I think it's the right tact. I think they've taken the absolute correct course with this player. If you have time, use it. If you have the ability to mine more information, mine it.
Yeah.
And look, Blake, there is a world where DeBrus turns into a 35-goal scorer, where Heinen's giving you 20, where Sherwood is a top 9 guy, where Dakota Joshua builds on 18 goals and gets to 25, where you're looking around and going, maybe Boeser gets us that top 4 right side defenseman because we feel good about where we're at on the wing.
And still only one puck.
A lot of things would have to break right there. It's, as we sit here right now, it's unlikely, but there is a world where that is conceivable. And Patrick Allvin, Jim Rutherford, if they want to sit back, wait, and see what plays out here with the player, with the rest of their wingers, and with their team needs, and we all anticipate that is the second pair right side defenseman. I don't blame them one iota. In fact, I think it's smart management.
But on the other side, if they lose their luck, and luck was on their side last year with regards to injuries, and you got to use everybody, and maybe Boeser plays a bigger role because nobody else is available. You never know.
Blake, there's also a world where they suffer a major injury or the goaltending is shit from the start of the year, where they're selling off UFAs.
They got a lot of guys on expiring deals.
Yeah, or
2-year deals.
I don't think that's likely, but you can have a great collection of skaters if you're not getting saves, and if Thatcher is unavailable for whatever reason, there is a world where the Canucks could have a really good skating group and just not get enough saves, and the season goes to look at New Jersey last year. Everybody was so high on New Jersey, myself included. You looked at the forwards they could trot out, the 4 lines they could trot out, the top end of their defense, and went, that is a great looking team. Didn't get saves.
They'll be good this
Buffalo
year.
last year. Yeah. Buffalo last year. A great collection of young talent, right? Oh my God, look at this. Blah, blah, blah. And Benson made the team. Look at all the goals and young talent in that Buffalo lineup. The 2 big defensemen, Power and Dahlin, didn't get saves, or at least early on in the season didn't get saves.
No.
That was that. So, there's also a world where they have to consider that. What's Boeser worth at the deadline if our season, for whatever reason, gets sewered? Lastly, here, McIntyre asked him about the Stanley Cup and making the Stanley Cup final, winning a cup. He says, I do think we are capable to challenge for the Stanley Cup, absolutely, but I'm going to use Jim Rutherford, what he said last year. Everything needs to go right for us in order to be there. This year, there's going to be a different expectation. Other teams are going to be ready to play the Vancouver Canucks from day one, so we better be up for the task, and it starts Thursday. I was actually thinking of a poll question this week about does everything have to go right? And I think he's 100% right here, that this is a very good team if everyone's healthy and playing to potential. I don't think it's a favorite in the West. I don't think it's a favorite to win the Stanley Cup. I would be surprised if they made the Stanley Cup final. And yeah, just about everything I think would have to break right if they're lifting the franchise's first Stanley Cup in 55 years next June.
Rutherford wasn't talking about that for the Stanley Cup, though.
He was talking about it for the playoffs.
For the playoffs,
year,
yeah. So you've moved the bar still.
Yeah, no, exactly. The bar's been moved, but I think the same logic underpins here.
100%. And you think about what went right for the Vancouver Canucks, the trades went right too, right? They acquire Zadorov, ends up being a big player. Lindholm, despite a slow regular season, ended up being a big playoff player for them. Like everything went right for them. So that's not a skill. Like there are other things involved there, right? Luck is involved with
that. Yeah, for sure. Luck is involved. Yeah, because the margins are too fine.
Yeah.
Blake, you have, for the most part, a competitively balanced league. The salary cap has achieved that. There is not a whole lot of difference between the aptitude, ability of the best team in the league and the fourth or fifth best team in the league.
And the hit that you receive 30 times between October and December and nothing happens, it happens in January and you get injured, right? So we'll see.
Yep. Hey, big game coming to BC Place next week. Vancouver Whitecaps FC hosting the TELUS Canadian Championship on Wednesday, September 25th, a week from today, 7 p.m. Caps looking to three-peat as Voyageurs Cup winners. They take on TFC, and of course, they played an epic shootout in 2022 for the Canadian Championship. With a win, the Caps, of course, can book their spot into the CONCACAF Champions Cup. We've seen that before. Free t-shirt for the first 10,000 fans and 50% off all beverages until kickoff. So get there early. Also, the Whitecaps are hosting a Toronto FC merch exchange for free tickets at the Caps team store. That's September 20th, Friday, and 21st, Friday. Caps TFC TELUS Canadian Championship, Wednesday, September 25th. The atmosphere at BC Place has been outstanding for this tournament in the past. It's always unmatched there. Get your tickets now. Check out Whitecaps FC.
We should mention that 50% off drinks before the match. It's a 7 o'clock match. You're a little conditioned for 7:30 matches in MLS regular season, 7 o'clock match. So that'll be go get your beers at 6:15.
Yeah, and free t-shirts for the first 10,000 fans. So looking forward to that next Wednesday. Let's get to today's menu, and it is brought to you by Greta. Greta! Hockey season's not yet here, but hey, there's still plenty going on at Greta. Watch baseball, football, soccer, and once the hockey season does get going, Greta, great spot for games, home and away. We'll be there with Canucks Army for some viewing parties throughout the season. Details on that coming soon. Minutes from the arena. Stop by pregame or after the game and check out the great street food menu. Do you know they have a poutine that tastes like a certain sandwich at a certain restaurant? It's quite famous. And the arcade, of course. And we have always pointed you to the arcade. It is one of the great air hockey tables I have ever seen. Weekly drink specials at Greta. In play. Greta's the place to be. 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar. Let the games begin. Frank Corrado's going to join us. We'll talk about his former defense partner, Alex Edler. We'll talk about Dakota Joshua. We'll talk about pushing top players having to push through. Talk about practice habits, of course. He played for Tocchet in this management group in Pittsburgh once upon a time. We'll also talk with John Shannon today on all the Canucks topics, but as well that big sports business announcement that Rogers Communications is buying Bell out of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment and assuming a majority position as owner of the Leafs, Raptors, Argos, TFC, other sports properties, and what that could mean for sports television going forward. So 2 fantastic conversations today with Frank and John. looking forward to their contributions on the show all season long.
And please do stick with us if you're on YouTube.
That's right.
Stick with us past the interviews. We're putting more of the show on YouTube, so you get to see us wrap up the entire local sports scene and get you up to date on some of our poll questions and all that sort of stuff. So stick around. We are now closing out the show properly on YouTube, as many of you have pointed out.
I think it's Chris and Duncan who's been hammering at us on this topic for some time. Chris, you were heard. Others, you were heard. We've had this in the plans for some time, and it's the fall and hockey season's here, so we're going to start rolling. Just some refreshments here on the show out as we go along here. Time now for our Bet365 bets of the day. The segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres & Price. I continue to look at the NHL futures market on Bet365. Last week, you'll remember, Blake, we looked at the Canucks over under 99.5 points. And we said, gosh, Canucks should be able to achieve that. Maybe not 108 points again, but they should be able to get 100 plus. Well, I think there's another Canadian team that Bet365 is selling a little short as well, and that's the Montreal Canadiens. Look, I don't expect them to be lifting the cup here or winning playoff series, but I think they're going to be a little more competitive a little longer into the season than 76.5 points. So I'm going over on the Montreal Canadiens, 76.5 points. That's at minus 135.
I'm going to look at the Whitecaps in Houston tonight after some amazing words from Vanni Sartini about the play of Pedro Vite. Pedro's due for a goal. Counting stats are down a little bit this year, but is he going to ride some momentum? Plus 650 as an anytime goal scorer for Pedro Vite.
Open an account with Bet365 today. Use code VANBONUS when opening that account because you can bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Frank Corrado coming up next.
Normally when we talk about Greta Bar YVR, we're telling you make it a game night at Greta, and we're talking about hockey. Of course, we're not quite yet at hockey season, but game night can mean whatever it means, and that could mean soccer or football game to watch on the screen or your own games, because the arcade is half the fun at Greta Bar YVR. Make it your game night at 50 West Cordova. And of course, great food and drink specials, and you can also make it a late game night as they're open late every single night. So make it a late game night, your game night at Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova.
Price from the historic Wall Center in this next interview, presentation of the Vancouver Canadians. The Canadian season came to an end this past weekend. We mentioned as they fell in the Northwest League Championship Series in 4 games to Spokane, but it was a great year at the Nat. We want to thank the Vancouver Canadians for partnering up again this year. The 2025 season will get going in April, and information on season tickets coming soon. As always, check out CanadiansBaseball.com. For updates. Here he is, former Vancouver Canuck TSN hockey analyst, Mr. Frank Corrado. How are you?
Good. I had a good time at the Nat like many, many years ago. I think they took us there during development camp to watch a game. So it's been a while, but I remember it being a fun time.
Have you ever faced a fastball? Have they ever put you in the,
No.
You get one?
No. There's no way I could hit a fastball. You think you could?
No, not a chance. No. But
no
you
way.
might have at one point in your career tried to tip a point shot from somebody else, and that's how different.
See, I feel like I could tip a shot because I'm just trying to get a piece of it, but to like square up on a fastball,
right.
I don't think there's. You could throw 10. I might make contact on 2.
Yeah.
They say hitting a fastball is one of the hardest things to do in all of sport.
Yeah.
And, of course, the great Tommy Lasorda line. Why do the golfers need silence to hit a stationary ball? And my guy's expected to hit a ball breaking on 2 planes with 40,000 people.
Stop
screaming.
it. I can't deal with that line. That is asinine. Like in golf, if you slice it, you're screwed. You're getting a double bogey. If you foul one off in baseball, guess what? You got another pitch coming your way. So the margin for error,
good retort.
The margin for error in golf is way slimmer than baseball. You could be standing at the plate for 10 minutes, foul ball, foul ball, foul ball, ball. It's like you don't get mulligans off the tee. You're in the water, you're taking a penalty stroke, and you're screwed.
Yeah, you gotta state that last sentence one more time for Matt. You don't get mulligans off the tee.
You do in our group, Frank. You should come play with us.
Oh man.
And I mean, I would say take it up with your paisan Lasorda. Alas,
Yes.
take it up with his estate.
Yeah.
Tell me about your old teammate Alex Edler.
Oh man. I mean, the video of him playing for the Canucks over the course of his career really does speak for itself. But always a very quiet, poised individual, super, super nice guy. I remember I played my first NHL game. He was my partner, and I was really, really nervous. But I think, he really had a calming influence, just kind of being around him, being on the ice with him on the bench. And I don't know, just a very, very classy guy that, I think a lot of everyone respected him, what he did on the ice, how he conducted himself, just a first class individual through and through.
We so rarely, if ever, saw outward passion, intensity, anger. Like there were not a lot of emotions with this guy. Did you ever see any of that? Did the fire burn in him and just wasn't outwardly demonstrated? Talk to me about that.
It's funny because, it never felt like that was the case. Like, I don't think I ever really saw him get riled up. But sometimes he would go out there and he would clock someone with a massive hit.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, well, where did that come from? Because I think I just saw the guy like 2 seconds ago and he was, very calm and stoic. And, then he goes out and makes a big hit. So the fire was definitely there. I don't think you can be that good of a player for that long and not have that fire. I just think he was so good at maintaining a level of calm and having that stoic look. And I think that really did serve him well, almost like the epitome of never get too high, never get too low. And that was, I think that's probably a big reason why he was able to have the career that he had.
Really thoughtful guy, really smart guy. When you pulled him aside and chatted with him in the rare moments when he would, in the rare occasions we do that, because he certainly wasn't a go-to for quotes or anything, and oftentimes wasn't in the dressing room. But when he was, and he wanted to talk about something, and he had the time, he was terrific. How talkative was he with his teammates? Didn't strike me as the type of guy who went up to guys starting conversations very often.
Well, he's very, very friendly guy. Like he would talk to everyone. He's and this was the case for a lot of those guys in Vancouver. Like it was a very friendly room, very welcoming room, and he was obviously a big part of that. Like say good morning, see you later, all that kind of stuff. If you ever had a question about hockey or wanted to talk, like he was always always very willing. But I think with certain teammates, you could see him maybe open up a little bit more. Like I think if he was hanging out with the Twins or maybe Yannick, like there was you could see there was that level of friendship that was just another step above. But I think he was really such a pleasure to be around all the time, and really made a point of being just being able to be talked to. Basically, I remember. Actually, there was one time I was on the team and he was coming back from injury. He was coming off the IR. And I think Sully looked over to a few of us. He was like, Eddie was practicing and he looked good. And Sully goes, oh, there he goes. He looks like $1 million, like can't wait to get him back in the lineup. And I think I said something to Sully. I think it's $4.5 million actually. And he chuckled at that. But that's he always just looked so smooth and made a lot of things look very easy and had the big booming point shot. And he was just a mountain of a human too, like a big guy. And then you get him on the ice with those, like with his pants on and his shoulder pads, like this guy's really big. And I just think like he maximized a lot of what he could. And really good player and really, really nice guy to be around.
His downfall might have been that he can do everything, and yet he didn't every night. But in the end, he is the points leader, the games leader, the goals leader, the assist leader currently, and Quinn's going to obliterate probably a lot of these in the not too distant future. But that's where it ends. If you said that about any other player on any other franchise, is it safe to say the jersey's hanging in the rafters?
I mean, it's a very compelling argument for sure. It just, I think it comes
for
down
a 50-year-old franchise, right?
For sure. And I think that's where, the national kind of spotlight maybe works against a guy like him, where, I don't think we ever spoke about him in the grand scope of defensemen in the league, like never talking about a Norris, never really talking about like a top 10 guy, but within that organization was always looked upon as the go-to guy for a long time, or one of the go-to guys for a long time. And of course has a lot of these records to show for it. But I guess, what he means to his organization compared to what some other people might mean to their organization is swayed by the, just never really getting the national spotlight or recognition among the league's best, or, the league's top tier of players at times.
Does he belong in the Canucks Ring of Honor then, Frank?
So like this is something that gets debated in Vancouver all the time, right? Like Luongo's number probably should have been retired, right? Like that should have been it's in Ring of Honor, should have been retired. So they're doing the Alex Edler night. Does that mean he should have been Ring of Honor at least? Like if you do that math, then, everyone's, these two guys are a tier lower than they should be. Yeah, he probably should be a Ring of Honor guy. Like how many years did he play for the team? Like it's 12, 15 years with the Canucks and all these records. Like, I don't know. I feel like that definitely is worthy of a Ring of Honor, because like I just mentioned, like, for what it may have lacked in national spotlight or, around the league, maybe not being considered in that top tier 1A, as far as the Canucks go, he is. He's always had the spotlight. He's always had the recognition, and he has the accolades to go with it. So I don't think, if you put him in the Ring of Honor, I don't think you would get one Canucks fan that said that guy is not worthy of it. Like, I think you would have a unanimous decision for sure.
And Matthias Ohlund are both there, and they weren't the player that he is.
No, and just because this night is happening doesn't mean he can't later be put in the Ring of Honor. I'm not sure the book is closed on honoring Alex Edler by the Vancouver Canucks permanently at Rogers Arena, even beyond this game against Philly on October 11th. Okay. Let's move on to the current club. First of all, a word or two about Dakota Joshua, what he announced yesterday, or what the club announced yesterday on Dakota's behalf.
Listen, I think it's a reality check for a lot of people that, life can change very quickly, and the other thing is to make sure that you are, on top of your health and making sure you're getting things checked out, because you don't know, and you want to make sure you catch things if they come up. And we're obviously all thinking of him, and hopefully everything's okay and he's back on the ice sooner rather than later. And it goes beyond the conversation of, how do they replace him in the lineup and all that kind of stuff. Like health and something like this is first and foremost. And I think obviously good for him for catching it, and hopefully he's able to move on, and hopefully we see him back out there, as soon as possible.
The Canucks and we have to believe, said this off the top, we have to believe that he's going to be okay. That's certainly the messaging that's going to be there. So I think we can, with relative guilt-free conscience, move on and talk about the hockey permutations of that. And truth of the matter is, there is depth there for however long he might be gone. And it might be 2 games. It might be 15 games. We'll find out later on this afternoon, probably from Canucks management. But this team knew about it earlier, and you wonder if it guided their hand a little bit in terms of their forwards acquisitions in the summer. The fact that they've got some depth now that they can make a go of it for however long he's gone.
Well, I think all of a sudden the Sammy Blais PTO makes a little more sense. A team that was flush with a lot of wingers, or, a lot of the same type of guy, maybe lower in the lineup, like that makes sense. Phil DiGiuseppe makes a lot of sense. And, even if you take a look at lower in the lineup, like, Kiefer Sherwood, like a lot of these guys are just, they're guys that can be plug and played, for the time being. So they will have solutions. The thing with Joshua is he was so good last year, and I think that that leaves a taste in your mouth where you're like, well, how much better can he get this year? Can he push the envelope a little bit more? Maybe he can push to be a player higher in the lineup, and that certainly is still on the table for him. But I do believe they're in a position where they're well equipped to handle not having him for the time being. But there's no doubt you want that guy in the lineup, because what he was able to do last year when he kind of put it all together with the physicality, the tenacity, getting in guys' faces, the confrontations to add with the skill and the scoring touch, that's a nice little package that he really put together. And I think, myself and a lot of Canucks fans are really looking forward to see him building on that, and maybe becoming one of the league's players where you talk about him and you're like, that is a guy I do not want to play against. One of those guys that you say, I hate to play against him, but man, I would love to have him on my team. And he certainly has the makings of that.
Well, and his goals per game, his goals per 60 are even better than his just stats as you look at it on the back of the playing card. He makes the most of every minute he gets out there.
Yeah, and that was the thing last year with that third line. Like, for whatever ice time they were getting, they were really, really productive. They spent so much time in the offensive zone, and things really seemed to gel that way. And I guess, when I don't know if you have the conversation of, at some point getting Dakota Joshua higher in the lineup, like what does that do for whatever line he would be playing on? Like, it's nice to know that there's a guy who could be a little bit of I hate to use this term sometimes, but like a play driver, like someone who can say like, I'm going to make sure we're playing in the offensive zone this shift because I'm going to disrupt something on the forecheck and I'm going to turn a puck over and now, get some more skilled players, playing in the offensive zone more than they would have. Like, I just think there's a lot of possibilities and a lot of potential for a player like that. And that line and him specifically, like they did a lot with, I'm not going to say a little, but they didn't have, at times the most ice time to work with, but they really made it work when they
Alex Burrows to the Twins, right? And not that he doesn't have the speed of Burrows and it's a different player, but it's the same idea is, he could benefit from playing with a guy like Elias Pettersson. Maybe he's the off-wing guy for Elias Pettersson.
Different than Burrows in the sense that like this guy will hit you, stare at you in the face, then proceed to punch you in the face after taking off his gloves and squaring up with you. Where I think, Burr had that physical edge for sure, but I don't know if he was going to necessarily square up with you. And then probably, and then probably beat the wheels off you too, because like this guy, like he's big, he's strong. And like, I just think he's one of those guys, like you don't want to mess with a guy like that too often. Like he packs a mean punch. So he's not as my old coach, Travis Green would say, he's not a bluffer. That was always a term he used. Someone he would let us know on who on the other team was a bluffer or who wasn't.
Yeah. By the way, did you catch up with your boy Di Giuseppe this summer? Did you talk to him, see him at all?
No, I didn't see him. See, the thing is now I'm not training anymore, so I'm not at the gym. I'm not at the rinks, unless I see someone at a bakery grabbing an espresso or grabbing a veal sandwich. There's just, there's just not a lot of time to catch up with guys.
Breaded veal sandwich that we're talking?
Double breaded when you're retired.
Double breaded. My goodness. The only thing that Frankie is catching up on these days is sleep when the Twins keep him up.
Yeah.
This management group and coaching staff a little bit. And Allvin has already challenged both Boeser and Pettersson this week. He said of Brock, he thought he took his foot off the gas after he got to 30 goals. Could have had 50 instead of 40 last year. With Pettersson, he said, I definitely need him back to another level. What do you make of how candid this group has been with its expectations and pushing even further on some of their best players?
I like it. Like I'll even go as far as to say I love it. And I think last year in Dakota Joshua is a great example of that, where Rick Tocchet was very blunt and very honest, not only with him, but outward in the media about what his expectations were for that player. I think as a player, all you can ask for is give me the honest truth. And I may not like what I hear, but it's probably what I need to hear at that time. And you know what, if that's how management feels about Boeser, if that's how they feel about Elias Pettersson, that's probably how a lot of people feel about it. So, you know, there's nothing that frustrates you more as a player when you're kind of just getting buttered up. You know, it's like, hey, it's all good. Keep it going. You know, like, well, you know, you'll get there, this and that. It's like, no, man. Like sometimes you just need to hear the truth. And I think, you know, as a player, if you can kind of face that head on, it's so much better for you than hiding from it. Because if you hide from that, you'll hide from other criticisms, or you know, you'll hide from watching your own video when maybe you're not playing well because it hurts you to watch it. It's like, face that kind of stuff head on, and you can only ask for transparency and honesty from, you know, your coaches or your management group. And if they're willing to give you that, I think it shows that they think highly of you, they care about you, and they care about the team. And that's really all you can ask for as a player. I'd rather have it straight up and honest than give me the run around and butter me up, and then after I don't see something coming. Like, let's
what about
be
the
honest
distinction
right
that
from
is
the
public,
get-go.
though? What about the distinction that is public and not just behind closed doors? Because
See,
you could draw the line there.
You could, for sure, but I think when done properly, it's okay. Like I the fans in Vancouver specifically are not stupid. Like, they know that Elias Pettersson had better down the stretch. You know, like everyone kind of realizes that. So if the GM is not acknowledging that, people might start asking questions like, well, what the hell is this guy talking about? Like, we all see it. How do you not see it? And I always think, like, when, you know, if you talk to the player about it and you have that honest conversation, there's nothing wrong with just saying, like, hey, here's where we're at. We know we need better from this guy, and we know we can get better from this guy. It's not like you're going out there and you know, saying things that are demeaning or degrading. You're just kind of spitting the facts. And I think that's okay when done in an honest way. I think the fans can appreciate that, and I think the player can appreciate that once you decide that you're willing to face that head on.
Allvin says the practice habits still need more consistency. How do you receive that? What do you make of that? I mean, it's 2 years in, a year and a half into the Taka tenure, and he's still pushing on practice habits.
See, I don't know. Maybe I got to get down there and watch a practice. But like when people are harping on practice habits, it's usually pretty straightforward. Maybe you don't stop and you do the big flyby and grab another puck when you mess up in a drill. Maybe it's not as physical when you get into some of the 5-on-5 or the 2-on-2, the 3-on-3 battles. You know, maybe guys like still will overskate pucks, or, you know, not sharp to start practice. Like that's all the kind of stuff that people would talk about when they talk about practice habits. But I kind of look at it this way: like, coaches are not keeping you on the ice for an hour plus in the NHL. Like, really, what you have to do is think about it. It's probably 40 to 50 minutes. You probably get a couple drills to warm up and get your hands going and get your feet going. Then you'll ramp it up into like some kind of, you know, 2-on-1 into a 3-on-2 drill, into like some 5-on-5 stuff, do some special teams, maybe a little bit of battling. And that by that time, practice is done. Like, it's not hard to be good in practice. You know, everything is set up for you to be good in practice. So I don't know. I think, not that it gets overstated, the importance of practice, but it's like the easiest thing that you could possibly clean up as a player. Like, it's literally just paying attention in a little bit more and kind of just giving a shit a little bit more about, you know, how you execute in practice. And I think coaches appreciate that extra effort. Ultimately, you could be a great practice player and be terrible in the games, though. So if you're going to pick one or the other,
True.
just be good in the games.
I see that happen all the way down to the junior level, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've just encapsulated Blake's career. He's great in the games.
There's
Give him
some
a game,
guys,
he's outstanding.
Some guys, it's like their practice, they're barred down and they're flying, and then in the game, it's like, was so and so playing today?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I
was probably one of those guys. I was a good practice player, really good practice player, totally irrelevant in the game sometimes, but it's all good.
As we watched Matt and his playing partner at golf on the driving range, me and my partner, Mike Coghill from Yellow Dog, Mike said, practice. The crutch of the ungifted. We proceeded to win every hole from there on in.
No, we won one.
See, I look at it this way with golf. Like, I don't want to waste any good shots on the range. I might roll a few putts, and then I just want to hit the good shots on the course, because I think there's only so many of them when you're not a professional.
And when you're your age, you're right. When you're our age, it starts to change,
Right.
and you need lubrication in the joints.
Right.
You sure do.
Yeah.
You sure do.
Yeah.
Frankie, love that you give a shit on this hit weekly. You're great at it. It's a game, and you step on up. Appreciate this. Until next Wednesday.
Listen, I don't warm up for these. I step right up to the first tee, get a high
You don't
cut.
do voice exercises?
Red leather, yellow leather.
You don't do scales? La, 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 la.
Yeah, not yet.
Thanks, man.
See you, boys.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Sick Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center, and this next interview brought to you by Mr. Lube and Tires. Change your oil, change your wipers event is on now. Visit MrLube.com to download your coupon for a free pair of Goodyear Hybrid wiper blades with any oil change. Only for a limited time. Mr. Lube with 18 locations in the Lower Mainland. Joining us now, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia, and Blake and I spent a fair bit of time up there earlier this week. Mr. John Shannon, how are you?
Doing great. You've spent more time in Oliver than I have.
Indeed. Year. Oliver sends its best. They're proud of their native son.
Well, listen, it's a great place to grow up, and it's a great place to play golf. So how can you go wrong?
I'm gonna start carving your face in a big placard of wood so they can put it on the "Welcome to Oliver" sign someday.
I like the fact that it calls itself the wine capital of Canada. I think that's probably better.
That speaks to you too, maybe a little bit too. Right?
Well, you know what? I'm waiting to go into the Boeser and Owl Hall of Fame. So.
There you go.
It reminds me, John, Dennis Hall, one of the great after dinner speakers out there, talking about their hometown, where home of Bobby Hall in huge letters, and then underneath, and Dennis.
Yeah.
We need you in Bobby Hall font, not Dennis.
And I don't know about that, but it's, as I said, there's always a little Oliver in the Shannon household.
Yeah, great stuff. Boy, scary news from Dakota Joshua here and his announcement yesterday. And really, really good advice. Check yourself out. Get yourself checked out. If something doesn't feel right to you, by all means, go seek medical advice.
Just another reminder that athletes are human too. And that's something that you're right. Whether it's the prostate or testicles, I mean, just do it. Mm-hmm. You know, and don't be afraid to talk about it.
Yeah,
I think that's the one thing that comes out of it. I mean, look at Phil Kessel, who had a similar situation, very successful surgery, rehab, and arguably on the fringe of a Hall of Fame career after his testicular cancer. So it's certainly survivable and good for Dakota to be public about it and make people aware of it. And hey, we all should be much more conscious of making sure our bodies are in great shape.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on here. It's been an interesting.
By the way, just there, you know, we're a lot of people are hopeful that he'll be ready for the start of the season. But to be a little snake bit, I mean, Dakota Joshua is one of the great stories of the Canucks in the last two seasons. And let's hope that he can come back and be a real factor for this hockey club, because he's a difference maker, not just for this hockey team. He's a difference maker in the National Hockey League. And every team is salivating to try to find a way to find their own Dakota Joshua. And it just so it happens the Canucks are lucky enough. And let's hope that he can stay healthy, whether through its surgery or whether it's through healing of broken bones like he had last year, to make a difference for this team during the regular season and the playoffs.
Not many guys can have these career years without having played 80-game seasons, and he's been that good in his 60-odd games that the Canucks still felt the confidence inside in him. So you're right. Let's hope he gets that number into the 70s at least this season.
Mm-hmm. It's been an interesting week here, John, where Patrick Allvin has done some interviews in advance or during the Young Stars tournament. He said about Brock Boeser, I felt he took his foot off the gas after 30 goals. I thought he could get to 50. And then on Elias Pettersson to Ian McIntyre, quote, I definitely need him back to another level, which he's capable of. The general manager has not been shy about challenging some of his players and challenging some of his best players. What does that say to you?
It says two things. First of all, that there is no satisfaction of being eliminated in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And it also speaks to the real belief that guys like Pettersson, guys like Boeser have another gear. There are times to be outspoken. Usually this is the time when Jimmy Rutherford is putting the pedal to the metal with these guys. And now it's Patrick's turn. And you know, another voice other than Rick Tocchet's saying it is really important for this hockey club. I think it speaks to the belief of potential more than anything else for this franchise and for this particular roster of Vancouver Canucks, that there's probably a thought that this team can go a lot farther than a lot of people are predicting that they will. And whether that's a conference final or a Stanley Cup final, there's something to be said for that for Rutherford, Allvin, and Tocchet.
You get the feeling that there's a possibility that they have to look at this roster later on in this season and make some hard decisions on it. Like, there's not an obvious bad contract on this team, but you could see there being some sort of hole that appears. And might they have to make a hard decision on a current roster player that people just have no problem with, but some you have to give to get, you know?
First of all, the fact, Blake, that you can say there are really no bad contracts on this roster, when you look what it was like 3 years ago, it's an amazing story.
Crazy.
Yeah. And it tells you how quickly things can change. But I think it speaks to, yes, I think everything's on the table when it comes to post-Christmas and trade deadline discussions and what this roster will look like after the international hockey tournament break and what this team needs to do to get to that next level. This is a very good hockey club, you know, and you know, whether it's based on the success of the club in front of Thatcher Demko, or whether it's based on Thatcher Demko's health in the long term, this club can be a difference maker in the Western Conference. But that won't stop Rutherford and Allvin from making changes, even to fan favorites, even to guys that people love here, if they think they can be better when it comes to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And that's the one thing that Jimmy Rutherford has always been prepared to do. He's not afraid of change in order to win. Because after all, loyalty is one thing, but this is professional sports and winning is everything.
Allvin still says their practice habits have to improve. Would that concern you at all?
No, I think that, you know, every once in a while, I think that managers say things just to, you know, to throw it out there, just to, you know, I mean,
keep the intensity even, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just, you know, I mean, if you can't tell me that the guys that are behind the bench or running the practices don't realize that too, and aren't communicating that with this club, I think you're sadly mistaken. This is one of those things where, you know, I spent a lot of time around Glenn Sather early in my career. Actually, I've spent a lot of time around Glenn Sather my whole career. And the one thing that Sather was like when he was running his hockey clubs, he was much tougher on his hockey clubs when they were winning, because and was probably a little more liberal with his thoughts when they were struggling. Now, they didn't struggle very often in Edmonton for a decade, but when they were on a roll, he was as tough as you can be, because you know that players are human too. And they do, like Allvin talked about Boeser, they do take their foot off the ice, off the pedal sometimes, and that's a challenge. So just to make sure that they're continually improving, the attitude is there. I don't mind it when a manager challenges players at any time of the year. And this is probably the best time of year. Everybody's healthy. Everybody's got a good attitude. You know, when you start, you know, criticizing in January when everybody's a little sore and guys have missed time already and they're tired of practice, that's one thing. Now's the time to set the standard and live with it and see what happens until Christmas.
Boeser, do you expect 40 goals again from Brock Boeser?
Boy, 40's a lot, guys. 40's a lot of goals. I probably am, you know, can he do it? Sure, he can do it. But I think anything north of 30 is a good season for Brock Boeser. I really do.
Is it fair to push him beyond that? Like the words that Allvin used were kind of like he's expecting 40 out of it. Is it wrong to sort of lay that gauntlet down?
Well, I think what you do is you have to go through the whole roster and say, oh, you know, all the goals we scored last year, where did they come from? You know, who underachieved, who overachieved, and if there's an expectation of what happens and who has moved on and who's still there, you know, there's an expectation that Brock Boeser has to be at a certain number. You know, I mean, if the number that they're expecting is 40, boy, oh boy, oh boy, that is an awful lot of goals for a hockey player at this point. So I'd say I'd put him in at 30, and I'd under-promise and over-deliver. I think that's probably the best way to look at it.
John, we have to talk to you about this massive move in sports business and sports ownership circles with Rogers buying out Bell of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, now taking a majority position. Larry Tannenbaum apparently in his 25% stake is not for long. First things first, just your overall thoughts on what this means for the sports media consumer across the country, because as we know, what happens in Toronto, you know, the ripple effects are felt in the other markets.
Well, I'm not sure you're going to feel any effects, to be honest. I mean, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment is a standalone business. Keith Pelly runs a standalone business, whether it's owned by 3 people or 2 people or even a single ownership group. You know, there's TSN is still going to be doing hockey. They're going to be doing Maple Leaf hockey. TSN is still going to be carrying Toronto Raptors basketball. TSN is going to still be carrying TFC soccer. So I don't think that there will be very much difference for the consumer. You know, the attitude of the hockey group, the basketball group, is one that they're trying to win championships. I just don't see that changing in the short term. This whole concept of a single owner in Toronto has been rumored for the last 2 to 3 years. The only people that really could make it work were the Rogers group. There wasn't the appetite at Bell, and Larry's just doesn't have deep enough pockets to do it. I think the surprise for a lot of us is it happened today. This is something I think we expected to happen 12 months from now, 16 months from now. But this was an inevitability in my mind.
Is there a world, can you see a day when Bell does not own Bell Media or Bell does not own TSN?
No,
No?
Never. TSN is a very profitable business for Bell. You know, one of the reasons Bell is out of MLSE is they needed, and I'm not a business guy, but they needed to pay down some of their debt. So I think there's a lot of relief in the Bell executive offices and BCE that they're able to pay some of the debt down with this 4.7 billion Canadian dollars. So from that perspective, that's the business side of this. This is not Bell turning its back on sports.
Well, so first of all, and Blake and I have covered this over the course of our show and experienced this when we worked for Bell Media. Bell is beholden to that dividend. And as a BCE stockholder, every time it comes in, I go, oh, yeah, that's why I own the stock.
Right.
So they're going to do everything in their power. They lurch from quarter to quarter, figuring out how are we going to make good on that dividend for the sake of our shareholders. You don't see that requirement eventually leading them to get out of media? Because I got to tell you, from the inside, John, it didn't seem like they had the same affinity, or in some cases, if you want to be harsh, even any appetite to continue in the media game. They would forecast on media. They would fall short of those forecasts. We used to always say, you don't have a media problem, you have a forecasting problem. But it just seemed like everything they did, at least towards the end for us, was to downplay and diminish the media side of their business in comparison to and I think Mirko even said it in the release today about strengthening their core businesses.
Well, I understand your question, Matt, but if that was the case, then why are they signing 20-year deals as part of this sale to guarantee that the Maple Leafs are run on a regional basis? Why are they signing a 20-year deal?
So that they can sell it, John.
Yeah.
So that they can
sell TSN, or at the very least, so that people don't look at it and go, oh my God, what's going to become of TSN if they're no longer in an ownership position with two of the big drivers of content?
Well, listen, but they still are a huge driver of content. It's just that their ownership of this. Remember, they got into this 12 or 13 years ago because there was fear that there was going to be somebody other than Canadian-owned media companies controlling where MLSE product went. So this was an unholy alliance from the beginning. Mm-hmm. Larry Tannenbaum put the alliance together in order to protect Rogers and Bell with content and Canadian ownership of MLSE. Most of the ownership opportunities 12 years ago were from outside of Canada. This maintained ownership inside of Canada. The fact that it's lasted this long in many ways is a miracle and a testament to what Tannenbaum stood for in trying to make sure that MLSE was a driving force of professional sports in our country.
Okay, the next question. And there's already games being shown on Amazon this year. Mm-hmm. In 2 years' time, is there a chance there are NHL games on both Canadian sports networks, or is it going to be one or the other? Whoever wins the battle there in the bidding war.
Yeah, that's an interesting. My gut tells me that the single. And the league used to call it a gatekeeper, the single gatekeeper rights holder that Rogers is right now and has been for the last decade. I think the league will probably suggest that we're better off with 3 rather than 1. And is that going to be the only way to increase the rights payment, Blake? That's what this is all about for me. So I suspect that we're going to see national games on a Bell-owned channel, national games on Rogers' own channel, and then a streaming service. Yes.
One team we didn't cover on this Bell Rogers business with MLSE. What happens to the Argos? Because they're not on Sportsnet and they're not a very good business. Could you see Rogers moving on the Argos, basically trying to sell it or folding it, giving it back to the league, anything like that?
Well, I think that if you're an Argonaut fan, and I don't know how many there are in Southern Ontario anymore. Although their crowds are up this year, guys. I think they're about 19,000 people per game. TSN or Bell again reaffirmed its position within the CFL, and they reaffirmed that they were going to cover the Argos. But that is a question I think that we're probably going to start to ask a year from now when this ownership deal is finally in its fruition. The other part of that too is you mentioned Larry and his role. I think we're going to be talking about the Bell deal with Rogers for the next year, and probably 6 months after that, we're going to be talking about how Larry will divest himself of his 25%.
Yeah, and for CFL fans across the country, I know they don't want to hear it, and a lot of them look at the Argonauts and go, "Oh, some of the crowds are embarrassing. It's not up to standard." The fact of the matter is, the CFL doesn't work without a team in Toronto and the ability to capture the Toronto television market, because the television ratings are still pretty good for the CFL all these years later. So you can't just lop off the country's biggest television market and think you have the same business going forward if you're the Canadian Football League. You mentioned the Unholy Alliance, John, and I can tell this story now. I'm sure you probably heard of it. When they were making the announcement that both Rogers and Bell were buying their shares of MLSE, they had this big elaborate press conference. Both CEOs were there. Apparently, the underlings had made a deal that, look, CEOs tend to go up in front of public audiences and beat their chest about how great their company is and everything they're doing. The underlings struck a deal. Neither principal was going to do that from either side. They were going to play nice. Nadir Muhammad of Rogers went up first, started talking about how great Rogers is. George Cope and the Bell people were just sitting there fuming. So from the very moment that this deal was announced, you had the competitive juices of both telecoms right there, a forefront. So not surprised that the deal all these years later is no more.
Well, and listen, for the longest time, there was a side deal between Rogers and Bell that they would never go to a board meeting without having agreed and be a unified front at the board level. And so it really worked for a longer period of time than many of us had predicted, simply because both companies knew what was best for the franchises. And in the end, that really only changed when George Cope left his position. And it appeared then that Edward Rogers was being a lot more powerful in these situations.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if there are any matriculations, even to some of us out here in the frontier on that. Thank you for the conversation, John. Until next week.
Always a pleasure, boys.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center. You can text us 778-402-9680, email live at harrisonprice.com, and welcome YouTube audience to the final segment of the show. We're putting this on the
formerly very exclusive space. Yes.
Yeah, formerly just the podcast side. Whitecaps in Houston tonight to face a hot Dynamo team that is chasing them and just 1 point back for sixth place in the MLS West. As we know, Whitecaps have games in hand on just about everyone in MLS West. They're off to LA on Saturday. Very tough place to win. And so you got to feel like all eggs in this basket and make sure you come away with 3 against a direct competitor in the mid-pack of MLS West. Apologies, buddy. I thought you were in Houston to do this game. You're in Salt Lake to do another MLS game. So early E's and O's for me yesterday. What do you know about who we'll see out there for the Caps tonight?
Well, we have chronicled this. Last weekend started 7 matches in 22 days. A furious pace. Thankfully, at least, in large part, they are relatively injury-free, and guys that are hurt, they're knocks. So what they're going to do is, I would be surprised if Ali Ahmed gets off that plane, meaning I don't think he got on it. I think the likes of him and a guy like Stuart Armstrong are likely to stay behind, train hard, get the training that they need in at home, and then meet the team in LA. To counter that, you're thinking, oh my goodness, they look so good last week.
Yeah.
Okay. Kubas will be there. He'll likely be able to start, and Brian White will be there as well. Probably not going to start, but I would guess 30 to 45 maybe from Brian White. So, they're not at full strength. It's not like the best 20 are available here, but they still got a very good, 16 to 18 that are ready to roll. And then you've got fresh legs, fresh ammo versus LAFC on Saturday. So I don't mind the approach here to make sure that you've got some gas in the tank versus LAFC.
If they're healthy, they have some depth.
Yeah.
We'll see about their star power beyond Gauld. We'll see if White can recapture form. We'll see if Armstrong can keep it going. but fully healthy. They have some pieces. Vanny talking about Pedro Vite coming off a master class against San Jose on the weekend. So, yes, very difficult. So difficult that we might see multiple keepers here, Blake? Like, is it that level of stress and strain?
Well, Isaac Boeser will play the Canadian Championship final coming up on September the 25th. That's for sure. I think there's a possibility some in this. So now there's 6 games left in this stretch. We know he's playing 1, so there's 5 left for Yohei Takaoka there. Yeah, I would guess Isaac Boeser plays one of them. Which one? Don't know.
Yep.
Be surprised if it's the next 2, to be honest.
Okay.
But I think on the other side of that, it's a possibility.
And you mentioned the TELUS Canadian Championship Wednesday, September 25th, 7 p.m. kickoff at BC Place. Caps looking to be a three-peat winner here of the Voyageurs Cup, taking on Toronto FC, who they beat for the Cup in that epic shootout in 2022. With a win, of course, the Caps would book their spot in the 2025 CONCACAF Champions Cup. Hey, free t-shirt for the first 10,000 fans and 50% off all beverages until kickoff. So get there early at BC Place on the 25th. Also, Caps are hosting a TFC merch exchange for free tickets at the Caps team store on September 20th and 21st. Caps, TFC, TELUS Canadian Championship, Wednesday, September 25th.
Yeah, we want that atmosphere to be
the
tippity top for that one.
It has typically been an awesome atmosphere.
Yeah.
At BC Place for the Canadian Championship. It's been an event that soccer fans have gotten behind in this community. Love those Canadian rivalries. Yep.
If you want to get extra fired up, go look at TFC's performance in the semifinal of this.
Oh, yeah.
And look at the behavior of Lorenzo Insigne. And if it doesn't make your blood boil and want you to beat them, then I don't know what.
Well, and they snuck by Forge FC in the semifinal. Get your tickets, whitecapsfc.com. Grey Cup Organizing Committee made some announcements on Tuesday, including their tagline, "All roars lead to this." Also announced that Sam Roberts, Biff Naked, Felix Cartal will perform in ticketed and free events that include 19 artists here over the week. Of course, the Jonas Brothers will be playing halftime.
Very cool.
Of course, everybody hoping the home team will be in the game, but some work to do at 500 with 4 games left in the regular season. The BC Football Hall of Fame has announced its 2024 class. So congratulations to Paul McCallum and Glenn Suter, who will be inducted as professional players. Sean Olsen and Mike Emery as amateur players. Of course, they were both central figures in UBC Thunderbirds football for a while. Dave Hawkshaw, who is the only Canadian official in the National Football League. Doug Stavely, a noted 40-year high school coach. And some guy named Lalji, perhaps you've heard of him, Blake?
Yes.
I believe he's got a son who plays quarterback. They're all going in as builders. Congratulations to Farhan. And our buddy Julio Caravata is in the media wing. So congratulations to all the
couple of Hansworthians in that class.
Yeah, exactly.
Hawkshaw and Emery, I believe Mike went to Hansworth as well. So
you've got some peoples there.
Yeah.
Lions also announcing plans for their Orange Shirt Day game tomorrow. The game is next Friday versus Hamilton here at BC Place. Of course, the Leo's on a bye right now. Orange Shirt Day is September 30th. Final results of Tuesday's poll question. We asked you, do you expect another 40-goal year from Brock Boeser? About 1,000 votes here, Blake. Yes or no? What did the people say?
They said no.
Indeed. Percentage?
71.
60. Canucks girl. Yes, he has to or he's gone. Saw a lot of that in the comments that, management, especially after what Allvin said this week, needs Boeser to be that player or they're not interested in bringing him back. Uncle Terry says, not a chance. Last season will prove to be an outlier. Expect regression in the mean, both in terms of goals and games played. Capspace Andy, very few players you can expect 40 goals from. All of them are first ballot Hall of Famers. Brock is not one of those. And then East fan, Nucks fan says, if Miller has a repeat performance, it's more likely than not. Number 9 drives, whichever line he is on. Errors and omissions from yesterday's program. As mentioned, I said Blake was in Houston. He's not. Eddie Willis with a couple of minor mistakes talking about his book. It was 74-75 when the Canucks first got to the playoffs, not 75-76. Also missed the date in terms of when the book is out. It's October 5th. There was no hashtags on Monday's show. I meant to mention that, but I don't think I did. And then Yerke has me for, and I'm going to have to talk to Yerke about the program he is using that transcribes our show. I think it's a little bit like the closed captioning where sometimes you get a proper name and it doesn't quite pick it up. He says I called him Victor Ulrichsen, not Vilmer Ulrichsen. It is possible, but I do know his name. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Yerke, for your
Vilmer's a very distinct name, too. It's hard to screw that one up.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you connecting with the show. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels. That's YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Follow on social. That's Twitter, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, live 11:30 a.m. Pacific time on many of those platforms weekdays. And, of course, support the community sponsors we're telling you about. Keep it local.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.